All right, everybody. Good afternoon, and in the case of John, good morning, because John's out in Las Vegas at Black Hat. So it's thanks for everybody for joining for our webinar today. It's Boldly Block Threats with Curated Intelligence, brought to you by Bandura and one of our great partners, Bambenek Consulting. So from an agenda perspective today, you're going to hear from myself. I'm Todd Weller. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Bandura Cyber, and John Bambenek, President of Bambenek Consulting. John, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So from an agenda perspective, we're going to give you an introduction to the Bandura Cyber Intelligence Marketplace. We'll do a deep dive on well-fed intelligence by Bambenek, and John will share a lot of good detail there, and then we'll go into Q&A. As a reminder, if you have a question, feel free to put that in the Q&A button down in the Zoom window, and we'll be sure to answer that. So at Bandura, we're really focused on making autonomous cyber intelligence and defense accessible to everyone. And we do it with one easy to deploy cloud-based solution. And there's really kind of three core things we do extremely well. First, we make the world's leading cyber intelligence accessible to everyone in real time. We simplify the deployment of intelligence with automation. And then we also allow you to defend your network using automation in real time. If you think about our platform, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of powerful capabilities from what we're doing. And I like to always hit on this briefly because we've evolved, we've added a lot of different things, but we really think of this as, a integrated platform, cloud-based, that allows us to automate the acquisition, deployment, and enforcement of cyber intelligence. So it all starts out of their cloud layer where we are aggregating and integrating cyber intelligence. That includes the out-of-the-box cyber intelligence sources that all of our customers get as part of their subscriptions. That includes commercial threat feeds, open source, government, but it also includes integration, other ways to get threat intelligence in. So that spans everything from general connectors, like our basic IPv4 address list, Stix Taxi, and a new one we just added, bulk CSV upload. The ability for our customers that are also members of ISACs and industry sharing communities to be able to kind of pull that threat intelligence in, as well as formal integrations we have with other systems, whether those are threat intel providers, threat intelligence platforms, SIMs, source systems, et cetera. And then Marketplace is a new addition to that we'll talk about. But out of the cloud, we are aggregating and integrating the threat intelligence. Our customers are interfacing with our platform through our cloud-based management portal, where they activate lists, activate the cyber intelligence, and really through simple policies, set those. And then our cloud-based services takes over the heavy lifting from there. We're constantly updating the cyber intelligence. We're delivering the policies along with that cyber intelligence down to our threat blockers, which are sitting inline on a network. Could be an on-prem network, could be a cloud network, could be protecting a remote user through threat blocker anywhere. And we're inspecting the inbound and the outbound traffic, and we're comparing it to all this cyber intelligence and making an allow or deny decision. And then, of course, our threat blockers are providing detailed logging of all the activity flowing through there. And we have great capability to allow you to syslog, export our syslogs out to log aggregation servers, SIMs of your choice. So it's a really kind of powerful platform. At the core of what we're about is data. As many of you know, at Bandura, we don't produce any of our own threat intelligence or cyber intelligence. There is a lot of good intelligence available. There are a lot of great providers, and our strategy is to be open and to partner with those providers. So here you can see kind of the various aspects to it, and it ranges from threat feeds we're providing, oftentimes it's not just about threats, right? It's about allowing known good. So kind of popular web services, creating automated allowed lists based on that. Integrations we have, as I mentioned earlier, with SOARs, SIMs. So over time, you're really going to see this ecosystem continue to grow, because we really view breadth and volume of data as being critical to not only cyber defense, but critical to our platform. That leads us to Cyber Intelligence Marketplace, which really fits well to that, right? There's, and we launched this a few weeks back. It's gotten great reviews. We're very excited about it. So what Cyber Intelligence Marketplace is, it's a It's a place our customers can go to easily discover, evaluate, and acquire leading cyber intelligence. It's over time, you'll see it evolve to a place that will have kind of automated organization and management of all of your cyber intelligence. It'll be kind of the place you go through one cloud-based interface. And then certainly you can instantly deploy that data across your network in real time. And the whole goal here, right, is to take action with the cyber intelligence to help you protect your network using this great data. So we're pleased to partner with Bambenek Consulting and the Bambenek Labs aspect of John's business. A great threat intel provider. John's got a lot of great, unique experience. The well-fed intelligence subscription is available on our marketplace. And that subscription will give you access to 3 distinct feeds. John will go into more detail: a sinkhole IP feed, domain generation algorithm feed, and a maldomain machine learning domain feed. So very excited about this. And with that, I want to turn it over to John. And John, first I'd love to say, thanks for joining us again. But who's Bambenek, and tell us about yourself.
Sure. I'm John Bambenek, right? I've been doing security for 20 some odd years. And the feed part of it is kind of has a unique history. Is in 2013, I was investigating CryptoLocker, the first kind of successful ransomware family that's led to the past 8 years of fun and enjoyment for all of us. But it used a domain generation algorithm and kind of said, okay, how can we use this against the adversary? And what we had problems in investigating is, we'd manually look at things and say, okay, these are the active domains. So, but they're proxies, right? Criminals run proxy networks to hide where they're really operating. So needed something quick so that once they threw up a domain, to get noticed quickly so that I can go give it to a law enforcement partner to get a wiretap while the proxy was still live, to go figure out what's behind it, and then kind of follow the rabbit trail down to, the actual place that holds the keys and hopefully attributive information. In that case, we did figure out who was behind it, and there's still an indictment for him out there. He's Russian, so we haven't gotten him yet, but named and shamed. Grew this to be over almost 70 families now of DGA malware that went commercial in 2019. But prior to that, it was open, free, used all over the world by organizations. So really spent a lot of time on the curation piece of it. Not just dumping all of the active indicators, but or dumping all of the malicious indicators, but only the really relevant ones that were useful to investigators. And it turned out to be really useful for security companies and security products and enterprises. Because of how I curate things, I also get some interesting insight in terms of what other security and insurance companies are doing with sinkholing malware. So a lot of these companies will take over domains or register malicious domains so that they get victim telemetry, which is valuable data, right? If you're an insurance company trying to underwrite a cybersecurity policy, how do you measure the security posture of an organization? Well, you look for malware infections. But those sinkhole IPs are consistent static infrastructure that all sorts of families of malware point to. So also learned that if you're looking for traffic or you see traffic to any of those IP addresses, you have a malware infection, because nothing legitimate should ever talk there. So because of the nature of sinkhole, I can't tell you what family of malware, but also you don't really need to leak your victimization data to a party who's going to use it against you. So that feed is available also. As an aside, actually starting in 2013 as well, I was an adjunct in computer science at the University of Illinois, and eventually went to get my PhD in machine learning. And some of my thesis research is how I'm working with some of my intelligence partners to proactively identify malicious infrastructure. Again, the same problem is by the time we see things, the adversary is already collecting information, right? How do we get ahead of that to find malicious infrastructure closer to the time that it's operational, or first operational, to prevent any problems whatsoever? So we'll go ahead to the next slide.
Awesome. So John, how do you collect, the threat intel? What's your process there?
Yeah, well, like I said, for the for the DGA malware, it's malware reverse engineering, and looking at sandbox telemetry. DGAs are fairly easy to spot as far as patterns of behavior. Especially in a sandbox, right? Oh, this malware sample is beaking out to 100 different domains that all look random, and I don't have them. So, then reverse engineer and add those to basically the surveillance and curation pieces of this, which is fairly straightforward, a little tedious, right? Because it's malware reverse engineering and it's re-implementing things. And then from there, like I said, to fed into the curation engine, which, and I said, there's an interesting data point in there. I do have a Twitter bot that anytime one of these new domains goes operational, it'll send out a tweet. Well, every time law enforcement takes down an entire family of malware, or not every time, but at one point I was sitting at a conference in France, and the FBI and some other people basically took down Interpol, or Europol. Yeah, it was Europol operation. They were taking it down in advance of the talk they were given, and I was getting, and broadcasting real-time law enforcement behavior, because you see all these things pointing to sinkholes and being registered all of a sudden. So I had to change that to be like, because you really probably shouldn't be giving real-time surveillance data of law enforcement operations. There's lots of doing kind of this bulk surveillance where you see all sorts of interesting things and other patterns to avoid or to accommodate. And lately I've been using passive DNS and my research to, like I said, not entirely proactive, but a little bit shorter of a detection cycle of finding malicious infrastructure closer to the time that comes online, so that it can be blocked before it's ever able to be used by a criminal operator. So that helps me get to some emerging threats, and there's lots of interesting things you can find in passive DNS. SolarWinds had a passive DNS components to research how it helped us to figure out who the victims were, to reach out to say, hey, we think the Russians were in your network. So there's lots of very, very unique things you can do if you have a good passive DNS provider.
Got it. Given that there's a lot of cyber intelligence that's out there, there's a lot of data, a lot of things we like to focus on is kind of uniqueness. So what's unique about WellFed, your intelligence and your value proposition?
So part of it is, since it's been operating for so long, I've spent a lot of time, both curating to identify false positives and prevent them, but really to hone in on the approach is somewhat different, is hone on to what's active and relevant, right? Many intel providers will basically dump you entire lists of data of malicious domains that may have been gone for 12 months. Most of my feeds are generated hourly, so there is a look back period. But when a domain goes away because it's taken down, it's taken over, it's deregistered, whatever, it comes out of my data, because there's only so many entries you have in a network protection device, or even a DNS server. So you can't put in millions of indicators for prevention, and that's primarily my focus is how do you create the data so it's easy and safe to just block things, right? Many intel providers, hey, you're on a SOC, you're researching indicators, some of the historic stuff is interesting, right? And I won't say it's not, but my approach is, let's just block the known bad and save the SOC or your analysts or your security team or wherever to focus on things that truly need to be researched. Instead of researching, like I said, something that's already known and thoroughly researched and can just be preemptively blocked. The data itself is used, I'm not VC backed. I don't have any investors, so it lets me be a little bit more liberal on how I use my data. So I give it to academics to, primarily they use it in their own machine learning papers. And that's how it's ultimately what got me into a PhD, to do the same thing. I've given the data to Quad Nines, and Quad Nines operates a public and free resolver and services to secure the broader internet for people who can't pay, right? And I focus some of my effort on that because, I'd like to pay for my kids' college, but there's a lot of people who just are never going to be customers of firms like us. that need some measure of protection too. And it also gives me a good feedback loop of false positives, so I can test new methods in a large globally operated and used resolver to get an idea if my approach is sound or not. So I don't know if anybody who does a single IP feed or uses it that way. I think it's a very straightforward way to identify and block things. The thesis research is mine. I take a very unique approach to machine learning when it comes to cybersecurity, and I think that's reflected in that feed and that data as well.
Yeah, that's definitely unique and definitely among our offerings. You brought up a great point earlier as well, which is a problem we solve, right? Which is a lot of existing network security controls, whether it's a DNS, right, or a firewall. They have significant limitations as far as the volume of data, third-party data they can integrate, and that's a key problem we solve, right? Because we can handle 150 million unique IP and domains, which is kind of allowing organizations to use a broader volume than they can with existing controls like a firewall.
Yeah.
So are there specific threats we should think about that your intelligence will protect customers from?
So the DGA feed is anything that uses a domain generation algorithm. There's ransomware in there, there's loaders, mobile malware, there's any form of malware that uses a DGA that I've reverse engineered and implemented, it'll detect. In one case, action and APT, which you don't necessarily think of when thinking of DGAs. Sinkholes is anything, right? Anything that Microsoft or Shadow Server or law enforcement or insurance companies have taken over. So that could be even down to the more pernicious forms of ad tracking, it can get in there. And then the maldomain feed is specifically calibrated to only criminally operated infrastructure for malware and phishing. So as it uses ML, right? I can't be more specific than that as far as malware families. But criminal operators set up infrastructure very different than benign entities, and you can discern that through passive DNS, right? Both with phishing and malware threats.
Great. And then a question we love to ask our partners is, what are new threats you're seeing these days? Talk to us about some interesting kind of trends you're seeing on the intel front.
Yeah, the criminals kind of know how we collect intelligence and disseminate it, right? A lot of intel feeds are either indicators of small classes, right? Of domain, hostname, IPs, hashes, certificate information. There's only so many different indicators that we have. And most TI providers are, give you maybe 6, right? Or other TI providers give you a big PDF, right? Which, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Attackers have adapted to that because all our marketing communication is public, right? They see what we're doing in our approach to things. So in the last few years, I think it's kind of interesting, that there's a lot of what we call living off the land. They get their foothold in the environment, and they try not to introduce their tooling until the end of the attack life cycle. So, PowerShell, I specifically call that out because almost any organization has PowerShell. It's really useful to manage an entire environment with PowerShell. It's also very, very useful for a criminal to own an entire environment with PowerShell. And scripting languages are very hard for AV to interpret or do whatever, right? Because there's no file signatures to be had there. But there are some interesting protective things you can do of, turning on PowerShell logging, locking it down, who can use it, and how it can be used and where, only using signed PowerShell scripts so that somebody just can't upload something and go. As long as you're managing, key signing, that's a very good way to lock things down. But the takeaway is, and part of the reason I love, the industry generally, but the specific piece of what I do with intelligence is things are always changing, and it's a game of chess, except that there's no winning, right? everybody's just moving pieces around all the time. We do this, the attackers will do that, so we're always learning and they're always adapting, and we're adapting, right? So it's, you're kind of by necessity driven to innovate and think about new challenges, and we put in new technology. So then we got to figure all that stuff out. I mean, we think of all the cloud challenges we've had over the past few years, 5 years, right? There's 3-4 years ago, somebody was just enumerating open S3 buckets and finding all sorts of interesting stuff that's people are putting on the internet in the cloud with no real protection. So, and we're starting to get a handle on that problem. So it's always changing and always adapting. And I don't like being bored. And, like I said, doing intelligence on criminal and sometimes nation state actors, right? It's never boring.
Totally true. So let's now shift to how we access Bambenek on Cyber Intelligence Marketplace. So for our customers, you'll go to our cloud-based management portal, what we call GMC. You can see the marketplace on the menu on the left with the nice new badge there. So you just click on Marketplace, you're going to see the menu. You can see right at the top there, Bambenek Well-Fed Threat Intelligence. You would click on that. That's going to take you to the next screen, which is going to give you a great description of the threat intelligence that Bambinek's providing. You'd see kind of the price as well. What you'll see there is, the cost of your subscription prorated to your current subscription. So if you are an annual subscription and you have 9 months left, it'll be prorated to that 9-month period. If you're on a 3-year subscription and you have 2 years left, it'll be prorated for the 2 years. So that's what you'll see there. You'd click purchase, and that would take you to the next screen where you'll see what the annual subscription cost is, that prorated amount I talked about. You would click, you've read the terms and conditions and can read those down below, and then you would click purchase. It's that easy. And then you'll see that your purchase was successful, and pretty much in real time, that cyber intelligence will flow into GMC and your threat blockers, and you'll be able to use that to protect your networks in real time. So to sum things up before we go to Q&A, we really believe that defending against threats today is a volume game, and that requires all organizations to use cyber intelligence, but also automation to scale their security efforts. At Bandura, we're focused on allowing our customers to easily access, deploy, and enforce using massive volumes of cyber intelligence from multiple sources. And we're really excited about Cyber Intelligence Marketplace because it gives our customers more choice and more access to leading cyber intelligence and high quality data from providers like Bambenek. And I think what we heard today from John is, Bambenek is providing, high value cyber intelligence, but also some really unique cyber intelligence around sinkhole IPs, DGA, that's really going to help protect your network from the various types of threats, ranging from ransomware to phishing to malware. So with that, love to turn it over to questions. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to hit the Q&A and submit it. We'll be happy to take them. While we're waiting for a question, John, one of the issues we get a lot is false positives, as far as how do cyber intelligence providers deal with that. You touched on that a bit earlier, but maybe a little bit more detail on what you do to mitigate false positives in your cyber intelligence data.
So part of it is I do slice and dice it by confidence. For our integration here, you only have the high confidence data because a lot of people are basically, give me an atomic indicator to block. Well, I mean, when you're dealing with an IP address of, say, a phishing website, it could be a multi-host, right? So I do identify some of that stuff and prevent that from being listed. But it's kind of by necessity, right, of running this as really a law enforcement project for the first 6 years. Is spent a lot of time, figuring out, okay, exactly where are the criminals operating? Because it operated more as a law enforcement intelligence tool for a long time, and you can't really send foreign law enforcement on too many goose chases until they get displeased. So it was by necessity of focusing on really what is the criminal actually actively operating. And working with law enforcement and doing that work is the curation engine there's been a lot of effort put into that, simply because that was the point, right? It's I wasn't going to be a TI provider when I created it, right? It was, oh, here's 1 million domains, go seize all of them, right? Or it was really, hey, what's truly the most relevant for law enforcement? The other aspect of this is I do provide the data to Quad 9. So if I get something wrong, I see it pretty quickly. And there's a lot of false positives that can happen that don't necessarily affect an enterprise customer, right? If in my feed there's some domain for somebody operating an internet business in Cameroon, there probably isn't anybody on this call who's ever going to generate a false positive by trying to go to that website. But if you're putting data in Quad 9s, you've got a consumer population, which is very different than an enterprise population, but one that's globally distributed. It gives me a more thorough and strict visibility into false positives than what is typical of other entities. Because a lot of people are waiting for false positive reports to come in on their data, where there's a measure of proactivity in my approach by simply doing a good thing and helping make the internet a safe place for people who can't pay. There's a return I get for that does have value, just not in economic terms.
Awesome. And then on your feeds, what's the average life of an indicator look like? Like, how often are indicators turning over, indicators aging off? What does that look like?
So the DGA feed, the kind of operating corpus is about 1 million domains that could be used by any of those malware families for the next 3 days or the previous 2. So it's a rolling 6-day window, because I don't really care about what the criminal is doing with domains that no victims are going to use, because the domain was relevant 6 months ago and is not relevant now. And then that of doing the surveillance and curation, I generate feeds every hour. So there is a brief look back period, but by and large, when things disappear or go away, it's usually within an hour, 1 to 3 hours, where it's out of my feed, and it's no longer relevant, right? And that could be IP address or whatever. The sinkhole feed is the only thing that's manually curated, because there's lots of ambiguity and certainty I need to have before I call something a sinkhole. So that one is just my personal research, but a lot of time goes into that curation.
And then the brand name for your cyber intelligence, I find interesting. It's called Well Fed. What's behind the name, and what do you feed it to make it well fed?
It's well fed in a different sense, right? It's if you want to think of like the first security enforcement device our industry had, it was a firewall. We've had firewalls for 25 years more. But typically, how firewalls have been deployed, and it's changed in recent years, is, okay, we're going to allow port 80 and port 443 and maybe allow this IP address to talk to a database in the back end. But by and large, it was, allow these ports and block everything else. But you have an access control list where, if an IP address is just universally bad, right? You can block a bulletproof hosting net block, and you're blocking a whole lot of maliciousness right then and there. But like I said, it wasn't really until recently in our industry that we are really starting to leverage these protective devices with ACLs and feeding them intelligence to do it. So it's well fed in the sense of feeding existing technology to block things, right? And the way I ship the data and everything is calibrated to make it as easy as possible for a wide variety of things to use it, either in a DNS server or a firewall or some other access control device, so you can just block things. So it's so it's well fed in the sense of keeping your ACLs or whatever list of stuff that you block well fed and relevant, so that there's a large percentage of the threat landscape you just don't have to worry about anymore.
That's great. And brings up, based on earlier points of the conversation, right? Like the importance of automation, the threat intelligence data is constantly changing, having that automatically updated. That's critical, right? Because we all have a shortage of staff, shortage of time. And I think that's, that's what we're about, and that's what you're about as well.
Mhm.
So great. Well, with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Check out Bambenek and the Well-Fed Threat Intelligence on Cyber Intelligence Marketplace. There's also some great information on our website, banduracyber.com. Just go to the integrations page and just click commercial, and you'll see that right up top. And there's a data sheet for Bambenek there as well. And then today we'll also be posting a blog with a link to this webinar as well. But the blog provides a lot more detail as well, and that'll be great information for you. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. John, thanks a bunch. We're excited about the partnership and about having your intelligence and data as part of our marketplace. And you have a good rest of the show out there at Black Hat, heading into DEF CON, and look forward to the download from you next week on that.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.